What is up, everyone? JD here. I hope you're doing well today. Today, we're going to talk about a real hot topic, that is spine wax. Let's get into it. So I have a few knives out on the table, and this video is actually not going to be testing spine whacking, but kind of talking about the state that we're in with the craze around spine whacking in it of itself. I've heard people say it's a dumb test. I've heard people say that if it can't pass that test, that the knife's garbage. And I just kind of wanted to talk about it, maybe express my feelings on the matter and get the community's feedback. Get the viewers out there to tell me a little bit about what they think, where they're at. So, typically what you're seeing happen, and I'm going to move some of these out of the way just to kind of to walk through this a little bit with you guys. What you saw on the table is you saw a crossbar lock with the Vosteed Raccoon. You're seeing the Shark lock from Demco. Here you're seeing a traditional frame lock. This is the Quiet Carry 9. I love that knife. And you have a compression lock. This one's a Spyderco, and then a traditional frame lock, this one being from Kunwu. So what you're seeing happen out here is you're seeing folks that are testing the knife by taking it and whacking the spine on something, hopefully safely with fingers out of the blade path, to determine if the lock fails, meaning it moves and the spine whack test causes the knife to unlock and become loose, ready to close, that it has failed. So I don't have an issue per se with a spine whack test. I get it. If there is an instance where you're using the knife and you're not being careful, because that's what it really boils down to, is you're using a cutting tool, you're not being careful, you get distracted by something, you hit it on a pole, a board that's nearby because of wherever you're cutting with, something to that degree. I've had people try to tell me, if you're in the middle of a cut and it gets stuck and you're pulling back out, well, again, if you're being careful, if the knife got stuck and you're being careful, you're not going to put pressure on it to the point where you see rapid hitting. It's going to be a one and done. So in my eyes, a proper spine whack test would equate to hitting it. If you wanted to test it again, opening it, closing it, opening it, let the lock settle back into its natural position. And I'm trying to use the pocket clip as leverage so I'm not on the lock bar, and then hit it again. The reason I say this is because, one, repeatedly hitting the knife is emulating batoning.
So instead of keeping that piece of wood vertical up in the air, lay it horizontal on a piece of wood and then just simply drive your knife into it. And then once your knife is driven into it, just bring it up. Now you can stand it up and continue to baton, or if you have a good knife, you can just twist that knife until you can get your fingers up top, move your knife away, or just place your knife back in your sheath to be safe, and then simply...
Not a once in a while, blue moon, rare instance where you're going to hit the spine once because you're not being careful, you're doing something that the knife's not intended for. Again, if you're doing heavy cuts and it's stuck and you're doing this, that's not a proper way to remove it. If it gets stuck, you should be pulling the knife straight back and out. Now, I could be wrong. Sound off in the comments. Maybe there's something I'm not thinking of where if you're in a cut and it gets stuck, instead of backing out, you're going to pull the knife out safely, right? Knife safety, common sense knife safety, in my opinion. Beating on the back of the knife is just emulating batoning, right? Bap, 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 bap. And that is not what a folding knife is for. If you're batoning, if you're carving through wood, hammering on the spine, you should be doing it with a fixed blade, not with a folding knife. That is not what they're designed to be. They're cutting tools that are meant to fold down, to be compact, easy to carry and store, and easy to deploy to use. Again, hitting the knife repeatedly, you're going to cause this to bounce. The lock is meant to disengage. It's meant to be able to fairly easily be moved over to unlock the knife. It's not meant to lock out. If it did, it would have a secondary mechanism to lock it in the open position, and some folding knives do have that as a safety measure. I still wouldn't baton with them because in the end, you're dealing with steel inside of a steel pivot that's usually 5 or 6 millimeters thick. While that is pretty thick, it's also hollowed out so that it can be screwed through. Again, just not meant to be heavy, hard use. They're not cold steels. Cold steels is probably a folding knife that is seriously overbuilt that truthfully could potentially take that type of damage. To me, what you're doing is you're just demonstrating that the lock has some give. You're hitting it, causing it to, slide over a little bit. Maybe it's not seating back properly, maybe it's not filed down properly, etc. There's a lot of factors that go into that. So to me, you're really just damaging it by impacting it. You're going to cause the knife to start to dig in, slide over, wear unnecessarily by repeatedly beating on it. I also feel like what I just demonstrated there is sufficient enough to prove the lock is not going to fail under pressure of normal use, I guess is the best way to put that. And I feel like that with a lot of frame locks. Like once you get it open, and another factor that I didn't take into consideration is break-ins. Some locks need to be broken in, some need to slide over. So, and again, I did twice. I just went against my own rule. I feel like that's going to allow it to bounce. So I feel like you want to deploy, you want to test it, and that's a good enough test. You can move on. If you want to repeat the test, that's where I say go ahead and open it and put it back into a secure lock position, because again, we're talking about accidental spine whacking. We're not talking about batoning, in my opinion. Again, sound off in the comments if I'm not thinking through a process in my own mind, because I'm thinking of this from knife safety. Another real popular lock is the compression lock, and the reason this one has a good deal of strength is because the liner comes over and it's compressed between the stop pin and the tang of the blade. So this is another really strong locking mechanism, but I still would say, that one was loud, that you want to reset the lock, and that's where you go. If it does fail, does that mean the knife is garbage, right out the gate garbage? Maybe. I would say there could be a variety of factors that you would want to take into consideration. One of them is the lock clean? Did they over oil it? Did oil spill down onto the lock? Does it look like, when you look on the back, it has any type of residue? Anything on there that could be wiped off or cleaned? Two, is it broken in? Is it a brand new lock? Maybe it does need a little bit of time to break in, and that's why I always point out the lockup, because I feel like the further it goes in for engagement, 20-30%, that's usually good lockup. And I would say probably 9 times out of 10, that lock bar is going to be strong enough to hold it. But there are even factors within that. It could be how much material is there, where it actually connects onto the tang of the knife. And this might not be a good example, because I think both of these use like 3/4 of the cutout for the lock bar. So, and when I'm saying 3/4, I mean 3/4 of the spine here is connected to the lock bar insert. If it's a smaller knife, a lighter knife, if it has a really thin lock bar, if it's a bolster, those all could have slightly thinner lock bars on them. Those could be factors as well. Is the pivot loose? I have heard people say, like, if the pivot has too much play in it. I haven't had this happen myself, but the instance that I'm thinking of are on button locks, and that's one that I didn't bring out here, but I do think I still have I do. I did forget about button locks, but I do have my Vosteed Raccoon with the sheep's foot blade here, and this one actually started the last time this craze became really popular. I can't remember what happened. I think someone had it just bounce loose on them. This one here locked up solid up and down. Actually, yeah, locked up solid. I was going to say I felt something, but it could just be the flex, because this is steel liners inside of my Carta scales. The steel liners are just to help the lock not move too much. And I've tested this one a bunch, and of course I'm saying when I tested it last time it didn't fail, and that was a bounce. That wasn't me trying to hit it twice. To me, the vibrations on the spine could cause this lock to slip a little bit, meaning the spring might bounce and allow the lock to move, and that could cause an issue. And that's where I would say, just if we're emulating or imitating accidental spine whacking, it's not fair to baton with the knife essentially by beating on it, beating against the lock, because you're not giving the lock a fair chance to demonstrate that it can hold on a clean opening. And I still feel like if you're cutting and you get stuck and you're doing this, if you're cutting, you should be able to pull out. If you're in a tight spot, then I would probably reset and see what you can do to safely extract the knife. I wouldn't try to back out of the cut if you're in a tight spot. And to me, is that really safe? I would evaluate in what scenario you're using a folding knife in a tight space to do that type of cutting, whatever it is that you might be working on. And I may not be thinking of a situation, and I am totally receptive to that in this instance, but I just feel like it's not fair. It's not fair. The lock shouldn't fail. Let me start there. I think the lock should withstand a medium tap, something that oh, somebody called your name and you're like, oh, and you turn and you didn't realize you were close to a pole or a stud or something like that, and you hit the back of the knife. But hammering with the knife, what are we talking about? What is that accomplishing? You're batoning. Like, that's what my mind goes straight back to, is you're batoning with a folding knife. And I really just don't think that's smart. Like, I don't think that's safe knife use. If you're batoning with the knife, I would hope you're really in an emergency in the woods somewhere, and even then, I hope you packed an Essie or something that is a fixed blade that would handle that situation where you needed to break down some wood for fire, for emergency, for safety. I hope you wouldn't depend in that instance on a folding knife that's meant to cut into stuff for food prep, breaking down some cardboard. Really, just in my opinion, that's not what folding knives are meant for. That's what triad locks are for, and that is what, in my mind, fixed blades are for. Like, not these folding knives. And I know I'm not going to go through all these because I'm not going to continue to talk about this. I'm going to, in their full review, do 2 to 3 tests of spine wax, and it's going to be, what I'm going to hit it, close it, open it, hit it, close and open it, hit it, and then I'm satisfied. If it is fairly being deployed and they're not slipping or anything like that, and I've done that with all of these knives, and I don't know if they're all on screen, so I do apologize, but I've done that with all of these knives. Open, test, close it, open it, test, and none of them have failed that, and it's been a generous hit without trying to Hulk smash the back of the knife. That's not to say that there hasn't been instances where on one try, because I go back to the raccoon, and my first raccoon, you could take the knife and emulate the failure just by carefully pushing like this, and it would take so little effort that it would pop to here. Like, you could control it. And in that instance, I would say that's probably not super safe, because I feel like that is so little force, that instance where you were like this and you got stuck in the cut and you can't get past whatever it is that you're cutting. If you're pulling and you just happen to pull up a little bit, trying to pull it out of the cut, I feel like it could, in that instance, fail. And that to me would be concerning. So I see the validity of the spine whack test, but I don't see the validity of batoning the knife on a piece of whatever, metal, wood, whatever it is that people are using to test on it, I don't think that proves that the lock is failing. I think that proves that you can't baton with a folding knife. I think if you're hitting it and it fails, you open and close it, and you hit it and it fails, you open and you close it, hit it and it fails, you've proved that there's something wrong with the folding knife. And even then, again, is the pivot tight? Is there oil on the lock bar? Is the lock bar broken in? Like, if I don't have a knife, unfortunately, all of these are done really well. But is it really early lockup? Do you need to send it in if it's warranty to get the manufacturer to address that and eliminate the early lockup? Or, is it used and you got it secondhand and maybe the OE is not going to back it up? Or do you feel comfortable and capable of being able to just file down the lock bar insert or liner lock or whatever safely? Or is it a lock that you don't know anything about? In that instance, even if it cost you a little bit, I would probably say you want to send those in to the manufacturer. And I've had springs break on my Benchmade bug out, my Hogue, I think it was the Deca. I never had it on the K320. I've had the springs break, and early on I wasn't sure because it was so new. I just wanted, well, it wasn't new, it was like 6 months on one, 9 on the other. I sent it in and let them check it over just to make sure everything was okay. They replaced the spring, said everything was good, sent it back, and I never had an issue with the bug out or the Deca after I sent it in for warranty. But in this instance, I actually keep backup springs because, they're going to fail, and it's really relatively simple to replace that. But I feel like the crossbar lock's another one too, with a 100% lockup going on there, long as it's radiused correctly. That one's another one that can be safe, especially if you test it, like I mentioned, and then retest it. If you're doing that, you should be good to go. I don't think you'll have any type of issues. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you feel like, batoning on the back of the knife, regardless if you disengage and re-engage the lock, it should never fail? I just feel like that's really harsh on a knife where we're saying in an emergency, in a one-off instance, can it handle it? And I feel like that demonstrates it. And I feel like relocking the knife up really emulates real world. Like if it was an accident and you lock it up and you're like, oh my God, I'm never going to do that, I'm gonna be careful. And months later, it happens again by accident. We're human, and I get it. I'm not trying to say that we haven't all been victim of not being completely, totally safe like we thought, or maybe things worked a certain way and we didn't realize it. Lock failure, knife opening unexpectedly. There's all kinds of things that can happen, but it would be spaced apart, and it may even be different knives. It might not even be the same one again. I'm curious. Let me know seriously, sincerely, your thoughts down below on this one. Do you think I'm right? Do you think it's fair to hit it, unlock it, lock it, hit it, to emulate for instance of an accidental spine whacking versus batoning with it? I just don't think repeatedly hitting on it proves anything. I think hitting it, even if you wanted to change the angle, I think you should still demonstrate it in a real world as best as possible, because even when you're doing it by hand, you're inconsistent with how hard you're hitting, and if you're just hard as you can in that short little motion, I question what you were doing with the knife that you're gonna hit the spine that hard on something. And it could be you're just testing it so extreme beyond any scenario to really ensure the safety, right? Like ensure that it's totally locked up. But sound off in the comments down below. I would love to hear your opinion. I love getting feedback and input from everyone, and it's okay if we don't see eye to eye on this. I think we're all saying we want it to be safe. I think there could be varying degrees of what we constitute as acceptable safety. Shout out to everyone out there that likes, uses the links, comments, is subscribed. I appreciate you guys. I love you. I hope you have a fantastic week. And until next time, peace.